Hi there. I recently rewatched the Netflix series Squid Game after I came across a quote from the creator of the show in which he expressed that the show is a critique of modern capitalism and wanted to conduct a Marxist, anti-capitalist analysis of the show. To be clear, this video will contain spoilers of the show, so please watch the show first. The creator of the show said the following: I wanted to write a story that was an allegory or fable of modern capitalist society, something that depicts an extreme competition, something like the extreme competition of life. Of course, capitalism isn't the only theme of the show. However, in this video I'm only going to focus on the anti-capitalist aspects of the show, so this video isn't an analysis of all the themes in the show, but just the aspects that critique capitalism. I will also address and debunk critics and commentators that have said that the show isn't critiquing capitalism, but it's actually a critique of communism. I've divided the analysis in three main themes: labor exploitation, extreme competition, and the myth of meritocracy. The character Ali Abdul perfectly illustrates the theme of labor exploitation in the series. Ali Abdul is a migrant factory worker from Pakistan who went to South Korea to create a better life for his wife and his child. Ali is portrayed as a naive, kind, and caring character. He seems to think that hard work and benevolence will be enough to succeed and create a better life for him and his family. However, his hard work does not pay off. His boss is exploiting him and even withholding his pay for 6 months. When he confronts his boss about the money he owes him, his boss says that he doesn't have the money, which is an obvious lie since there is a large amount of cash on the boss's table. The story of Ali Abdul shows that even if you do everything right under a capitalist system, your power as a worker is limited and there is only so much you can do to fight against those in power. His kind and benevolent nature is also exploited when he is pit against his friend Cho Sang-hoo in the game of marbles. In this game, every player is given 10 marbles and the task is to get the marbles of your opponent. How that is done is irrelevant. Cho Sang-hoo and Ali play the game against each other, and when Ali is about to win the game, Cho Sang-hoo lies to him and tricks him into losing, ultimately ending in the death of Ali. There's also other instances where the show illustrates the struggles of workers. The main character of the show, Ji-hoon, is an unemployed gambling addict who is deeply in debt. He enters the game in hopes of winning enough money to pay off his debt, take care of his medical bills of his dying mother, and provide a better future for his daughter. Ji-hoon previously worked at the car company for over a decade when his company fired a bunch of workers, including him. Ji-hoon and his co-workers then organized a strike. This strike got brutally crushed by the strikebreakers, leading to Ji-hoon seeing his co-worker being beat to death in front of his eyes. The writer and director of Squid Game said that he modeled Ji-hoon's character after the organizers of the 2009 Ssangyong Motors plant strike, which ended in defeat following sustained assaults by police. As pointed out by Jacobin magazine, the creators of the show draw parallels to the struggles of the South Korean working class and how labor movements are frequently crushed down, with union leaders being jailed. While Ji-hoon's situation could be blamed on personal choices, it is important to keep two things in mind here. One, Ji-hoon fought to keep his workplace, so it's not like he's lazy or unwilling to work. Losing his job that he fought for to keep was what led him to gambling. And two, Ali did everything he could and also landed in the same situation, playing the same game as Ji-hoon. Let's take a closer look at the quote from the creator of Squid Game regarding capitalism. He said, I wanted to write a story that was an allegory or fable about modern capitalist society, something that depicts an extreme competition, somewhat like the extreme competition of life. As you can see in the quote, he brings up the extreme competition that exists under a capitalist system. The creator draws parallels between the extreme competition under a capitalist system and the extreme competition in the game. The participants of the game compete in a life or death situation. Not only that, but whenever one of the participants dies, the prize money gets higher, which means that the remaining participants of the game profit off of the death of others. This could be compared to how capitalist corporations in the first world profit off of the death and suffering of workers in the global south or third world. Many capitalist companies exploit the labors of workers in poor countries to lower their overall cost, which leads to those companies and their owners making a higher profit per unit of whatever product they are selling. The conditions of these exploited workers often lead to them committing suicide or suffering in other ways. Squid Game highlights the brutality of capitalist competition by making the participants of the game directly profit off of the death of other players. When player 101 beats another player to death, the people overseeing the game do nothing, and the prize money fills up to an even higher amount. This does not only lead to participants directly profiting off of the death of other players, but it also reduces the amount of competition for the players who survive. Episode 5 of Squid Game is titled A Fair World. In this episode, the frontman says that the most important rule of that world, meaning the game world, is that everybody is equal. However, this is a myth. There is no equality in that world. There is multiple instances where the bodily stronger dominate and even kill the bodily weaker people. Not only that, but if we take a closer look at the game Sugar Honeycombs, the myth of equality falls apart. In this game, each player gets a sugar honeycomb with one of 4 shapes molded into it: a circle, a triangle, a star, or an umbrella. The players have to carve out the shapes with nothing but a needle without breaking their design. The players choose the shapes themselves. However, when they choose, they don't know what the game is going to be. Certain shapes are harder to carve out than others, and many of the people with harder shapes end up losing the game and dying because of that. This sort of myth of equality is a direct reference to a common critique of capitalism called the myth of meritocracy. This critique argues that meritocracy under a capitalist system is a myth because the social position one starts in greatly influences the possible outcome one can reach. Nobody can choose if they're born into a rich or a poor family. That is completely random, just like the participants in the game randomly choose shapes. However, the level of wealth one's family has greatly influences the difficulties one faces in life, just like the participants of the game face different levels of difficulties. Of course, there are abnormalities and there are people who overperform. However, we have to look at averages and large-scale statistical data here. If you want to learn more about the myth of meritocracy under capitalism, I recommend this video from Second Thought titled, "Is the US really a meritocracy?" There have been some voices like Tim Pool and ReasonTV who have argued that the show isn't actually about capitalism, but communism. This of course is easily debunked if we just look at our earlier quote from the creator of the show, in which he explicitly states that the show is about capitalism. This has also been debunked by various content creators. I nonetheless want to look at their arguments and address them briefly. If you want further analysis, you can watch the previously mentioned videos. So let's take a look at Tim Pool's argument.
My takeaway from it was communism bad. What was it about? You mentioned that the creator had said something and it was like...
The creator called it a fable for modern day capitalism. But also for life and the competitiveness of life. And that message, it's not subtle at the end, which I won't ruin for anybody, but it's not subtle at the end. And that messaging was there. And, you know, some people can't get past it. And I understand that.
I think the whole thing is the perfect example of somebody who thinks they're opposing capitalism, but just makes communism and wokeness look really, really dumb. And the show ends up being, in my opinion, more anti-communist than anything. So one of the big themes in the show is that everyone is equal. They all enter the game as equals, and they're allowed to play as equals. And there's an arc in the show where it's like somebody violates the equality, and so they kill him. And they were like, that's the worst thing you could have done is strip the equality. But now, here's how the show ends. You've been warned. In this equal system, everyone dies but one person who gets all of the money. Okay, so that doesn't sound to me like capitalism. In capitalism, we recognize not everybody is equal. Not everybody does have an equal chance. We do want equal opportunity, but some people are poor and some people are rich. In this system, everyone is wearing the same clothes in the same room, being brutalized by the powers that ultimately results in one person having all the wealth and everyone dying. That is not capitalism. In capitalism, there's too much food. People are morbidly obese, and there are homeless people who are fat. In communism, everybody wears the same clothes. They have limited access to anything. They get garbage food every day. They're like, okay, the game's over. Here's the food you get, and they get trash. Yeah. And they're fighting each other because they're starving. That to me is an indictment of communism. And if this guy who made the show is actually like, it's actually capitalism that's bad, I'm like, it just goes to show this is a person who made a great show but was really dumb and didn't understand they were actually critiquing communism.
This is a clear misinterpretation of the show's play on the myth of meritocracy. Even clearly capitalist media outlets have debunked this. In their article, The Meaning of Netflix Squid Game is Being Misinterpreted, Forbes magazine writes, in the context of the story, however, this reading doesn't make much sense. The scene is clearly poking fun at the myth of meritocracy. The show openly contradicts the frontman's message, with unfortunate players who choose an intricate candy shape facing the barrel of a gun or forced to jump on the glass panels first, having unknowingly picked the wrong number. Not to mention the fact that the oldest player, O Il-nam, was secretly a billionaire and enjoyed the protection of the guards. Cheating was, if anything, encouraged by the sadistic organizers of the games. Amusingly, numerous outlets have pointed out this intentional contradiction as a plot hole. The second argument is that Se-byuk is from North Korea and flees to capitalist South Korea. ReasonTV writes, one participant in the games is North Korean SKP Kang Se-byuk, who's accepted the deadly consequences and poor odds in the long-shot hope of winning money to bring the rest of her family across the border after a sleazy smuggler ripped her off. Are organ brokers and border coyotes examples of capitalism? They're black markets of the sort that crop up when voluntary trade is prohibited. If ReasonTV would be honest here and actually paid attention to the show, they would have recognized that there's a part in the show where this is already addressed. Yes, Se-byuk fled from North Korea, but there's a scene in the show where she gets asked why she fled. She answers that she thought that she would have a better life. When asked about if her life is actually better, she takes a deep breath, looks down, and doesn't answer. Her silence speaks volumes here. It is clear that her life is not better given the situation that she found herself in. These pseudo-arguments about Squid Game not being a critique of capitalism are nothing but attempts to cope with the fact that the outstanding piece of media might not agree with you. Or as put in this tweet, the overwhelming success of Squid Game has forced conservatives into a position where they have no choice but to either pretend it's a bad show or pretend it's not the most obvious anti-capitalist piece of media to go mainstream since Parasite. As mentioned before, even clearly capitalist outlets like Forbes magazine recognize the obvious critique of capitalism that is Squid Game. Forbes writes, Squid Game, conceived by a man struggling to hold his head above water under capitalism, is almost certainly not about communism. Plus, being anti-capitalist doesn't necessarily equate to being pro-communist, so the attempt to reframe the meaning of the series comes across as oddly defensive. Sometimes we find ourselves enjoying a work of fiction that is antithetical to our own personal beliefs, and that's fine. We don't have to pretend the messaging isn't there, but simply enjoy the story for what it is.